Lorraine, whether you're talking about, what the RBA does, what the latest inflation numbers for Korea means for the BOK, and of course the Fed, it's still about central banks going to next year. And you guys are actually in the camp that by March 2024, we'll see the Fed cut.
Yeah, we are. We're expecting basically the U.S. economy to start slowing over the next through to the third quarter of 2024. And we do expect inflation to start tapering off, and that would give room for the Fed to pause or basically lower interest rates starting, I guess, March at the earliest, mainly in the second quarter of 2024 is what we're expecting. We do think the U.S. economy will start slowing, and that's going to give reason, I think, for the Fed to cut.
That's good news for growth tech, right? That sort of underpins the opportunities you see across these segments.
Yeah, so essentially we've seen a good run up in growth names, in tech names, particularly in the U.S. markets, that hasn't necessarily translated, unfortunately, to the Asian markets. So where we're at now for the U.S. Tech sector is that we are moving into or growth sector there is moving into an underweight growth position in favor of value. But I would say in Asia, because we're still seeing discounts broadly in the markets here, that we would still see we do still see selective opportunities in tech as well. So I think in Asia we're still seeing more opportunities in terms of relative to fair value estimates, and I think that would give some room for further upside on Asian names.
Do those include Chinese tech giants as well?
Yes, it does. Although we are very selective here in Asia, and a part of that is because the China market is quite undervalued, but there are a different sort of macro environment that we have in China. We're seeing very slow consumer spending, very weak consumer confidence still. So we do need to see the Chinese economy sort of start picking up again, particularly on the consumption side, before we would be more broadly. We would be broad buyers. But having said that, we do see a lot of value in Asian names and in particular the Chinese names at the moment.
I mean, to your point, confidence is so low. Ownership of Chinese equities when it comes to top EM funds has now tumbled to a 5-year low. What will it take for that confidence to come back?
I think we need to see the Chinese economy start growing again. And if we have a situation where you do have macro growth in China, that's going to be, closer to 6%, that's going to exceed global growth. We're expecting a fairly soft global growth next year. There's probably reason enough for some investors to come back into the Chinese stocks. I think it is a very broad and deep market. I think selective names are going to still see unusual, basically above average growth. And some of the names, for example, we like on the domestic front include Luzhou Laojiao, which is a Baijiu company, a little bit different from the usual names that you would get, like a Maotai or Wuliangye. So we still see growth in some of these companies. We still expect growth for gaming companies like Netease, which is very focused on the gaming side, and we do expect more supportive regulatory measures, policies, for the most part, that would actually sort of encourage buying into some of these stocks again.
Talking about support, what about those sectors that have the backing of Beijing in terms of growth, whether it's green energy, EVs, and the likes?
Yeah, I mean, some of the EVs, we like BYD, for example. We have liked it for a little while now. We do expect on a short-term basis for EV sales to pick up over the next 1 to 2 quarters, and that's going to bring back some interest into these names that had a little bit of a sell-off recently. I think over the longer term, one of the global sectors or industries that we think represents good opportunity right now is actually lithium. Lithium prices have really come down, and so even names like Albemarle in the States, Ganfeng Lithium, Tianqi Lithium are names that we think are attractive at the moment, although we probably have to keep them for the midterm, given that there's still supply coming out that may pressure prices.